Hello. Today I will be going over Cat Fantasy's most recent patch that released today, patch 1.5, Dreamland Meowtopia, because I figured there was going to be a lot of questions asked by the community because of the sheer volume of content that we received on this patch. So basically, what we'll be discussing today is the new combatants that were added to the game, what I personally think about them, as well as, the existing banner, as well as a banner that's going to be coming later during this patch, as well as lightly touching on some of the events that are available in this update and how to navigate them. So the first thing to go over is that there are three new combatants as of this update, as of today. We have Aphros, the Pocket Maiden. We have Eleanor, Edge of Reason. And in a special type of event banner, which we will be discussing in a bit more detail later on, Selena, Moonlight Whisper, I believe. Um, as far as these characters are concerned, let's go ahead and take a look here. So Aphros is an AoE DPS of the Green Pathos Orbis Particle. She is essentially quite a formidable AoE DPS for PvE and potentially PvP content as well. Essentially, how this character works is she has an AoE card that deals AoE dire damage, which is unique. This is the first character, I believe, in the game to have AoE dire damage. Again, dire damage deals increased damage if the enemy has any sort of debuff. So she's AoE, she deals dire damage, and then the main mechanic around Aphros is her vigilance stacks. So basically, if anybody on your team, that as long as it's not only Aphros being attacked, if another ally is being attacked, or if you're being attacked by an AoE ability, Aphros will gain 1 stack of vigilance, and then when she reaches 5 stacks of vigilance, she will counterattack with a 1-star version of her AoE card as a free action, and it will deal 80% of the original damage value of this counter, right? So basically, she does big AoE dire hits, and whenever you get hit a certain number of times, she'll get additional free actions for AoE hits, albeit a little smaller. What's important to note with Aphros is she is fairly reliant on her duplicates. So let's go ahead and take a look at those very quickly. So if we take a look at her star effects, first of all, we have at 1 star. At the start of battle, she gains 3 stacks of vigilance. So instead of starting at 0 out of 5, you start at 3 out of 5. This means that you only need to be attacked twice in order to trigger that first counter attack, as opposed to being attacked 5 times. This can help front load your damage a bit better. It's generally fairly useful. And if you have the means, you can certainly go for it. I would say her most pivotal star effects are later on in her duplicates. So we have her 4-star effect. So the counterattacks, that the free action counterattacks will also grant SP, so you'll gain an SP when counterattacking. And the required vigilance stacks to get a counterattack are reduced from 5 to 4. So basically, with these two together, the first time you get attacked, period, she will counter. And then from that point onwards, every time you get 4 stacks, she'll counter. So I would say if you are, free to play, I think Aphros is, well, I guess I'll go over that after finishing going over this stuff. So at 6 stars, the counterattacks just hit harder, right? So instead of hitting for 80% of the original damage, it hits for 120%. So the counterattacks will actually start hitting harder than her actual skill card. So as far as Aphros, should I pull for this character? I would say that Aphros is generally a fairly valuable AoE character when it comes to green teams. PvE, PvP, it's pretty flexible. I don't think she's mandatory in PvP. I think playing Scarlet Minami is still going to be good enough, right? I don't even know if Aphros is going to be best in slot. So I would hold your breath on her viability in PvP until we're able to do more testing. For PvE, I will say Aphros is definitely a competitive option, even at lower stars. Obviously, there are a fair bit of AoE green options right now. Like you have Halloween Minami, and you have Echo Perfect Pitch. And then if you're coping, you have Poppy, technically, although I really would advise against this one. Um, but yeah, green has a lot of AoE options. So is Aphros a must pull? No, I don't think so. I think you can definitely go without this character, especially if you already have Minami. Um, I definitely think if you're trying to min max your account and push leaderboards and stuff like that, then I think you're more inclined to roll for Aphros. Because it's my opinion that Aphros is one of the strongest AoE DPS characters right now in PvE, assuming that you can get her to at least 4 stars, ideally 6 stars. So, at the end of the day, if you're free to play, I would pull for her if you like her. She's definitely great to have on the account, but if you have other green AoE options, you can consider skipping her. If you are a dolphin, I would definitely try to 4-star her. For sure. She's definitely a great asset to have on the account. If you're a whale, I would definitely 6-star her. She's definitely one of the higher priority units to 6-star as a whale. Not like top priority, but pretty solid. Like I would say Aphros is the strongest green AoE DPS on my account right now. And it's not close in PvE, anyways, right? I'm not talking PvP here. I'm talking PvE. But yeah, she's quite strong. Um, Second character that's running on the other rate up banner on this patch is Eleanor, Edge of Reason. So Eleanor is the sub DPS who is meant to pair with and enable Aphros, right? Think of Ren enabling Marlena, think of Shiro enabling Astra, etc., etc., right? So with Eleanor, the main focal point of her kit is going to be her perception debuff. So one of her basic cards deals typeless damage to one enemy and inflicts a stack of perception. And perception is a debuff that stacks up to 10 times, lasts 2 turns, and causes the target to take 3% more dire damage. So if the buff fully stacks, they'll take 30% more dire damage. And then other than that, and yeah, you have your passive as well. So whenever an enemy that has perception uses a offensive skill, they will gain an extra stack of perception. So this can stack up relatively quickly. 10 stacks does sound like a lot, but combined with her passive, and we will see some of her star up effects as well. Perception can actually stack up to max within like 3 to 4 turns if you have duplicates invested into her. And considering that Nightmare's Call is 10 turns, that's a lot of uptime to have max perception on an enemy. There are some caveats to her kit. There are some things to consider when it comes to pulling Eleanor, which we will go over, right? But first, let's go over her star up effects. So her 1-star, um, when an enemy uses an offensive skill, up to once per turn, you can unleash this card that applies to perception on a random target. It's not going to do any damage, right? It's going to deal 30% of the original damage with the card, and the motion value is already kind of and it's typeless, so it's not really meant to do damage. It's just meant to apply the debuff, right, onto one random target. Now, I wouldn't say that her 1-star by itself is really that worth getting like a whole other copy of the character, personally. Now, this does change when we go to her next star up effect, her 4-star. So what this does is, whenever she uses Tactical Precision, which again is the card that applies the debuff, it also inflicts an additional stack of Perception on all enemies. So the main caveat with Eleanor, right, is with her base kit, she applies this debuff to one enemy at a time. Aphros is an AoE character, which means you want all the enemies to have debuffs in order to maximize her output. So the main problem with Eleanor is it's really slow to apply perception onto all enemies if you are facing against, let's say, 3-5 enemy content, right? This 4-star effect remedies this entirely because every time you use this, and every time you counterattack with her 1-star effect as well, it will just apply a stack onto everybody, which gives her much better synergy with Aphros, because Aphros is AoE and she wants the debuffs to be spread amongst everybody. And then her 6-star is basically just more damage for her ultimate. From personal experience, you're not really going to be clicking too many cards on Eleanor if you have her at higher dupes, because she's just kind of passively stacking your perception, right? I pretty much just click this card once turn 1, and then it stacks itself up to 10, like just passively without having to use it, without having to click a card on her because of her 1-star and her 4-star effects and her passive. Um, so I mean, this can come up. It doesn't come up too often. It's not great, but I will say this does inflict damage on par with Asura and Shiro. So it is a nice nuke to have access to. It's just you're usually not funneling SP into Eleanor. Um, so as far as would I recommend pulling for Eleanor? So Eleanor is a bit of a tricky one since she's kind of tailor-made around Aphros. Um, it's very hard to recommend pulling for Eleanor at all unless two conditions are met, right? One, you have Aphros, obviously. Ideally at 4 stars or higher if you're looking to further vertically invest your team, right? And if you can get Eleanor to 4 stars as well. Because that's when they start to really synergize, and that's when the slot for Eleanor starts to become more justified, is when she has that 4-star up effect, right? Other than that, I can't really recommend pulling her, so it's kind of more of a moderate spender to whale character, in my opinion. Uh, Now, one thing that you may think of, because of her perception debuff working with, just dire damage in general, you may think of combat mode Shiro, right? Combat mode Shiro deals dire damage, so why wouldn't I play Shiro with Eleanor? The only problem there is that Shiro, I mean, it could work. The main problem is Shiro really wants Trinity on her team because her passive is a lot of her power budget. Eleanor is Orbis. It could work. I haven't tested it. I can't really advise or recommend pulling Eleanor for Shiro. It seems subpar. So, like I said, free to play, I would avoid. Light spender really depends on how much you're spending, right? I would kind of like, if you're going for 2 4-star characters to play one team, I would not really consider that as being a light spender anymore. I would consider that as being a moderate spender to a whale. So if you 4-star Aphros and you are willing to 4-star Eleanor, then I would say, yeah, go for it. You're gonna have a really strong green team for AoE content. It's gonna be great. Otherwise, I cannot recommend pulling for Eleanor. And we do have one more character. We have Selena. So the first thing to go over with Selena is how you acquire her, because they implemented a new type of summon in order to acquire this unit. So this is the Spotlight Dash. This is called the Spotlight Dash summon event. It's a bit convoluted, so I'll try to explain as best as I can without taking too much time. So essentially how this works is you have 2 summon currencies, right? You have combatant specific theater tickets, and then you have regular theater tickets. Both of these operate the same. You can use 10 of them to do a single or 100 for a multi. The only difference is that the combatant specific theater tickets can only be used on this specific banner. So these theater ticket Moonlight Whispers can only be used to summon for Selena in the Spotlight Dash banner, right? And then these will carry over. because they intend to run other characters in the Spotlight Dash mechanic later on. So yeah, and we don't know if these carry over or get converted because this is a relatively new summoning mechanic. But I would just make sure that you spend all of these, right? Um, at least these. These it doesn't matter, but these I would make sure to spend all these that you get from the event um, before this event. But I mean, this event lasts 4 weeks, right? So it's not too big of a worry. Now, as far as how the banner works, it's a bit convoluted. So essentially, there is a pool of a few items. Um, it says here that there's a selection of 30. Now, funnily enough, I count 33 here, but so essentially, out of the reward pool, it selects 10 items. These probabilities are the percent chance that this item will be picked uh, to go into the pool. Obviously, this is the first draw, right? So, like, if the first draw, it takes, if for the first item of the summon, it takes, this one point here, then it'll take that 18% completely out of the pool because this pool cannot be duplicated. It's 10 unique items from this pool. And you would think, oh, so I get these items, but that's not the case either. So when you summon on the banner, there's actually, and I'll show it right here because I mean, like I said, I just have these, right? So let's do the summon and let's see what happens, right? Also do keep in mind when you do a 10 pull, all these values are multiplied by 10. These are just the values for a single pull, if that makes sense, because it's always 10 items. So if you're doing a multi with 100 tickets, it's anywhere from 10 to 500 Selena shards. So let's just quickly do a multi on this banner, just to kind of showcase how it works. So you have 10 drops coming in here, and then he will either take the item and it'll go in the cafe and you'll have it, or he'll swat the item away, right? And then whatever items make it into the cafe, you keep. And whatever items he swats away, you unfortunately do not get. If you had a keen eye, you have also seen a progress 3 out of 5 on the bottom of the screen. This is because on the first, this is because when you do a multi, if you get if 5 or more of the 10 rewards get through the bouncer and they make it into the cafe, you actually get an entire free multi that you can claim. And this can stack up to 4 times. Now, from personal experience, I've only ever gotten 2 free multis from a multi before. As far as so this is convoluted. So these are the rates that they appear in the summon, right? So these are the rates that the drop will make it into the cafe. So if you have 10 particles, it has an 80% chance that you'll get it and it won't be swatted away. Whereas if it's 500 particles, there's only a 3% chance he'll actually get it. There's a 97% chance he's going to swat it away. So when you're summoning for a Selena, there's going to be a lot of scenarios where you have 200, 300, 500 drops that he just swats away, and it's going to be very tilting to see all those potential shards go away. So what's the light at the end of the tunnel here? Well, every time you get 1,000 of these shards, you're able to turn them into a copy of Selena. So obviously you would need 2,000 points to get her to 1 star. You would need 6,000 points to get her to 4 stars and 10,000 points to get her to max, right? I will say, so basically, bottom line question, right? How much should you expect to have to spend in terms of in-game currency to be able to pull a Selena, right? So I would say on average, it's about as expensive as a Luminox banner, which is fair, I suppose, because it's a black Pathos and Arena was a white Pathos, right? The light dark characters are meant to be more premium. However, there is a lot more variance in this event because there are scenarios where you can get upwards of 700 shards in a multi, and then there are scenarios where you can get nothing and make no progress, right? Now, the good news is, unlike the top of event that was used to acquire Selena in older servers like PTR and stuff like that, you actually do have a way to purchase these for opals. So it's 1,000 opals for a multi. Now, if now, like I said, there's a lot of variance in luck, right? So if you get lucky, you could get a Selena in as cheap as 10,000 opals, in my opinion. However, if your luck is, you could have worse luck. So I would anticipate having to spend upwards of 25,000 opals to get one copy of Selena, right? So then, okay, so I have to go through all these hoops. I have to learn this crazy banner, and I have to spend all these opals for the potential to get this character. What do? Are they worth it? Let's take a look. So, Selena is yet another AoE DPS. She is Black Pathos. She is Particle Form Quadrus. So essentially, what Selena does is so both of her AoE cards, her basic card as well as her ultimate, have a damage type called charge damage. Charge damage means that she deals more damage based on how much SP she currently has. And she has a self buff card that facilitates gaining SP even faster. So after you use her buff, she gets a small final damage buff for 3 turns, stacks up 3 times. Whenever any ally uses a skill, Selena has a 50%. This goes up to 100% based on the rarity, based on the star level of the card, right? But generally 50% chance to regenerate 1 SP. She can get up to 2 SP, and each ally can trigger this effect only once. So typically, turn 1 of Selena, you are activating her buff, you are activating 2 other buff or debuff cards from 2 unique supports, and then you are activating her AoE card, because Selena's own card is able to trigger this as well. And then you are just hoping that 2 out of those 3 pass the 50% check, because if they do, then Selena will have full SP and she will be able to use her ultimate as soon as turn 2. And essentially how Selena works is you just stack SP and you just ult over and over and over again. So I will say at a baseline, Selena is already going to be good. She's a Black Pathos character. This means that she is type favored into pretty much everything. She's neutral in other Black Pathos, I believe, but she does beat out White Pathos and the typical red, green, blue. Another thing to note about Black Pathos characters is when you go to the tower, right, and you go to the Mind Zone here, usually you need teams of that particular color. So, for example, when you go into the blue Mind Zone, you need a blue team. Now, the good thing about this is you can bring Black Pathos and White Pathos units are considered a wild card. So you can bring Selena. If I want to bring Selena here in the blue tower, I most certainly can. Right? She's Black Pathos. And then say if I want to do the red tower, right? If I do the red tower and I want to bring Selena, well, guess what? I most certainly can, because she's Black Pathos. Green Tower, I can bring her. She's favorable into like 95% of scenarios because you're not really fighting Black Pathos enemies too often. And even then, she would be type neutral instead of type disadvantaged like every other DPS. So she is favorable in every scenario. She can be played in any tower. Therefore, she's very flexible. Her damage output also is solid. I wouldn't say it's the best, especially at 0 stars, but I will say it's definitely going to be good enough to clear endgame content. So if you get a copy of Selena, pretty much won't regret it. We can go over her star up effects very quickly as well. So at 1 star, after using her buff, you get one of her AoE cards added to the deck. This is okay for consistency. It's not really mandatory at all. Um, and then once you get to her later star up effects, she starts to become more of a her damage starts to ramp up a bit more. So at 4 stars, when using a non-ultimate skill, if her SP is full, she will gain a stack of condense. For each stack of condense, she will increase her ultimate damage by 10%. And then after using the ultimate, these stacks will be converted into SP. So if you have full SP, and then you activate 2 cards, you will not only will your ultimate deal 20% more damage, but you will pre-funnel those 2 cards into SP, so you will have 2 SP after ulting, right? Um, so once you have 4 star Selena, it changes your playstyle a little bit because you want to pre-funnel until you have max condensed stacks and then drop your ultimate, then get the SP refund and keep going, right? Now, 6 star Selena. After using ultimate, keep in mind you can get ultimate pretty fast with good RNG. She gets a stack of an effect that increases her final damage dealt by 10%, and this stacks up to 3 times. So it turns her into a very strong ramping character. 30% final damage buff is quite a bit. Um, so once you ramp up and start chaining ultimates together, she will start doing a formidable amount of damage. Um, so as far as unit evaluation, I think Selena is quite good. She's very flexible. You can use her in pretty much any content that demands AoE and PvE. I think her PvP is a bit worse because she's setup reliant. I would say in PvE, she's part of the what I deem the big 3 of AoE DPSs. This would be Aphros, Selena, and Marlena, right? I would consider these 3 to be the strongest AoE options. Coincidentally enough, all 3 of these characters are currently running. So do keep that in mind. Now, as a free-to-play, would I recommend getting her? That's really difficult to say because, again, she can be more resource intensive to acquire than the other characters. I would say if you could only pull one character out of the 3 new characters that have just released, I would definitely recommend Selena if you have the means to get that one copy without hurting your funds too much. And then otherwise, Aphros is a perfectly fine option as well. You're just pigeonholing yourself into green teams at that point. And there isn't any other Black Pathos AoE DPS currently in the game, right? She's the only one. Aphros, there are alternatives. You have Halloween Minami, you have Echo Perfect Pitch. So I would say that if you're free to play, there are 3 new characters. You can only pick one. I would say that you should definitely try to get Selena if you are able to, right? Just do keep in mind it may cost upwards of 25,000 opals. Relatively inexpensive in terms of Amethyst if you want one copy because there are some value bundles that aren't too bad. I would say, maybe 100 USD to get one copy, assuming you spend no opals, right? But yeah, that would pretty much be. And then, of course, if you are a light spender, you can consider her 1 star. I really don't consider it to be as good of a consistency star up effect as some of the other 1 stars in the game, but you can definitely consider it if you really like her, if you just want her to be more consistent in general, just have more cards funneled into her deck, right? Because you want to play around her. If you're a whale or a moderate spender and you are looking into later dupes of Selena, I would honestly advise just going all the way. I don't think 4 star is substantial enough to stop there. I think you should just go all the way at that point. Just make her as strong as possible, right? Um, in my experience playing 6 star Aphros and 6 star Selena, they're both very powerful. Um, Aphros does feel a bit stronger right now because there are a lot of buffs in place in the events and Nightmare's Call that amplify her damage. But you take those buffs away, they're about even. It might be, and again, if they're even, then I would favor Selena as a unit overall, because Selena is going to be useful against a wider variety of content, whereas Aphros is only really going to be good against blue Pathos enemies, right? That's my personal point of view from having max stars on both of them. Playing both of them in Nightmare's Call, right? I have played both of them in Nightmare's Call at this point. Um, I've tried them in the event, all that good stuff. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the current characters. I will quickly touch on the other banner that is currently running. 7 days remaining, Marlena. I still think Marlena is a very good character. Blue AoE. Um, Obviously, I mean, there are options there as well. You have Scarlet, you have Ren if she has higher duplicates. I do think Marlena is by far the strongest AoE option for blue in PvE. Marlena, again, is very setup reliant because she relies on stacking a buff. But ultimately, if you're, as far as getting one copy of her, not a terrible idea. I'd still probably prioritize Selena over her. Um, if you're like a moderate spender, I would definitely advise getting Marlena to at least 4 stars, especially if you own Ren. Ren being right here, right? Um, but yeah, Marlena is very good. One of the big 3 AoE DPSs, like I said. So if you really want to prioritize strengthening your Blue Pathos team, you already have Ren. You kind of want to bundle them together. I would definitely advise picking up Marlena. I wouldn't say she's top priority though, but she is good. She's definitely worth going for if you want her, right? And then there is a future character that should be here in, I'm going to assume, around 2 weeks, which is going to be Sage. Um, Not going to go into too much detail about Sage because she's an upcoming character. I haven't been able to personally test her, but judging by her kit, she's going to be a very, very strong defensive unit. It will be highly advised for people to pick up at least one copy of Sage, I would say. She's just very, very good, both PvE and PvP. I'm not really gonna, like I said, I'm not really gonna go into detail on Sage because she hasn't been released yet. I haven't been able to test her. But I will say, right, she is going to run 2 weeks in. All of these other banners besides Marlena, right, Aphros, Eleanor, Selena, they're all running for 4 weeks. So Sage is coming halfway in. So all those other characters will still be running. So if you don't know what to divert your resources into, if you are considering Sage, you could wait the 2 weeks, right? Because the other banners aren't going away when Sage arrives. So you can definitely wait the 2 weeks and then decide what you want to do with your resources then, right? Also, it's just going to kind of depend on whether you need whether you need a DPS at this point, or if you do want the defensive utility that Sage provides. If you have to pick and choose between the characters, right? Beyond that, as far as the content this patch, we did get 2 new skins. We do have the Afro skin. It is a UR rarity skin, just like the Sylviette skin that was released a couple of months ago, which means it is going to use these golden prized vouchers in order to get her. It is approximately 130 USD to acquire the skin. If you have to go to full pity, which is very likely given the probabilities of acquiring her at the various thresholds. I mean, you might get her on like the 8th or the 9th pull, but generally you want to play around having to go to hard pity to get her, right? Which is around 130 USD worth of Amethyst. There are also two new Glamour Galore skins. So you have the Viola skin, Heartfelt Touch, 2 Pathos threads, and then you have the Selena skin right here. The one thing to note about Selena is she's only worth 1 Pathos thread because she doesn't have as much, I guess, skin interactions as Viola does. But it is the same rarity, it gives the same stat line. So if you only care about stats, Selena's skin is good value, right? And then, but do keep in mind there are going to be some Irithyst skins releasing in the future. Uh, as you can see, there are like 4 different Christmas skins that are likely going to be in the Irithis shop, likely going to release next week. We have a skin for Combat Shiro, we have a skin for Marlena, we have a skin for Ren, and we have a skin for Abyss Oath Sylviette. This will make Sylviette the first character to have 5 skins, which is a lot of stats. But yeah, if you want to get these skins, I would make sure you set some Irithis aside for when they release, likely next week, because next week is Christmas. Other than that, you have your standard event here that has story content. You have this parkour mini game that you can use to get rewards. And then you have a boss event with 4 different phases worth of leaderboards. This is an AoE boss with 3 enemies. This is meant to. You are meant to play the Afros team against this, as they have team-wide character bonuses for having these characters versus this boss. And by ranking well, you can actually get free pulls towards Selena. So if you have a strong account, maybe you want to wait, right? Because these phases are going to end and the rewards will be distributed after 1 week, right? So this is week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. So you can wait a week for Selena, right? See how many of these summons you're able to get. And then you can go ahead and see what you can get with those, and then go from there. Now, as far as what I would recommend as far as a team, um, as you can see, what I brought along here, like I said, I would strongly advise bringing Afros along. I would bring Eleanor along as well if you have her. I would advise bringing a second AoE green DPS such as Minami, or Echo Perfect Pitch if you don't have Minami. And then the reason why I bring Triss to this boss is because this boss has attacks. This boss has an AoE attack that applies energy barrier to your entire team, which means you're unable to gain SP, unable to use your ultimates. So Triss is very good here because after he applies that debuff, it goes down to 2 stacks, which lines up perfectly with Triss's AoE Dispel. Triss's healing is also enough from what I'm able to find to keep your team alive. So I would definitely recommend bringing Triss. If you don't have Eleanor, I would definitely recommend bringing a second sustain, especially if your supports are less invested. I would look into bringing an Anya in this case, in this slot. Other than that, the last thing I have to go over is the other endgame mode that was updated today, which is Nightmare's Call, right? So the Nightmare's Call reset this week. It'll reset again in 2 weeks. That's when Sage releases, right? For this Nightmare's Call, Afros and Eleanor have team-wide buffs when you have them on your team. Now, as far as the buffs go, and these Nightmare Surges will apply whether you're doing the challenge mode boss for leaderboard or if you're doing casual difficulty 1 runs, right? The top half really wants you to use dire damage, so it's very favorable. Very extremely favorable to use Afros and Eleanor. Shiro combat mode can also be considered. The enemies are blue pathos, so you want to bring green. So kind of that same shell of Afros, Eleanor, Minami / Echo Perfect Pitch, and then a sustain option. Eleanor can be replaced by a second sustain option, right? And then the bottom half, allied combatants with crit damage boost deal more damage when allies are under the effect of damage sharing. All allied combatants' damage dealt is further increased by an additional 20%. Now, I don't believe we have a damage sharing character in the game, so I don't know why that's there. But this first buff here with the crit damage boost is very favorable if you are playing the Battle Pass character, Viola, right? Also good if you are Felicia is also another option for a crit damage buffer who can trigger that damage increase effect. Generally in the bottom half, again, it is going to be blue. If you don't, I personally played Selena here. If you don't have Selena, you could definitely split your Minami and your Afros, and then play like Minami down here. Maybe play her alongside a Perfect Pitch Echo, and then place like a Shiro or an Asurop on the top half or something. Alternatively, you could try playing Marlena Ren on one of the sides. Just keep in mind that mileage may vary here because you're not going to have the Pathos type advantage, which means you are losing out on quite a bit of damage compared to playing a green or black Pathos character, right? But yeah, other than that, that is pretty much everything important to go over in regards to update 1.5. There was a lot of content released today, and I would imagine this video is fairly long as it was a bit comprehensive, maybe a bit more comprehensive than it should have been. If you like this kind of comprehensive analysis of the patch, please feel free to let me know if people want me to continue doing stuff like this for future updates. I could definitely look into that. Uh, but until then, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.